all of your energy is being sucked out of your body and into places where you have no power, because your power only exists in this moment, because this moment, the present moment, is the only thing that is real. Hi, my love. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my podcast if you're listening on there. For those of you who are new here, my name is Michaela. I'm a hypnotherapist and spiritual mentor, and I am incredibly passionate about sharing what I'm moving through on my own personal healing and awakening journey to hopefully help you feel a little bit less alone on your own journey and to provide you with tangible tools and insights that have helped me to create safety in my body, to trust myself again, and to lead a more fulfilling life. So today we're going to talk about how to remove the overwhelming fear of the future. By the end of this video, you will have so much clarity on the exact steps you need to take to start to lean into your faith and trust a little bit more and start to listen to your intuition, that internal guidance system that's leading you down a path of your soul's deepest fulfillment. That path is not always going to feel like the safe and logical path. So in order to get that strength to be able to listen to yourself again, we have to learn how to face our fears and to stop letting them control us. Most of us are living a life where we are actively running away from what scares us. We're running away from our fears, trying to, as quickly as possible, figure out who we need to be, what we need to do, what we need to plan 20, 30 steps ahead in our lives in order to not face failure, in order to not face our fears. On this path, we are led by our egos. Our egos are constantly scanning around what everybody else is doing, comparing ourselves to the people around us, and making us feel like we're running out of time, that we're not safe to slow down and listen to ourselves and be present, but we constantly have to be obsessed with finding all of the answers of what we need to do 10 steps ahead in order to make sure that we're safe. When we live from this place, we spend our lives running. We spend our lives never feeling safe enough to actually anchor into the present moment and enjoy what is currently going on in our lives. We live in a state of survival, constantly having to be looking around at all the worst case scenarios so that we can try to avoid them. This is a state of being that many of us are called to break free from. We are called down a path where we can walk steadily and slowly towards what we want instead of running away from what we don't want. And there's a big difference there. When we're running away from what we don't want, we are taking action that is guided by trying to avoid our fears rather than taking action from our inner guidance system. Our inner guidance system will literally only give us the next best step. And when we're living in a state of fear, when we're living in a state of dysregulation, often that's not good enough for us. We want to know that that step is leading us to exactly where we want to go. We want to know the exact roadmap that if I do this, then I'm going to have stability and security and I'm going to find the love of my life and we're going to live happily ever after and it's all going to work out perfectly. There is a part of us that is deeply afraid, that wants to know before we take any action that we are going in the right direction. And unfortunately, what this leads us to do is to try to copy what other people are doing, to try to look outside of ourselves for that guidance, and then we get really lost in our lives. We get really confused because when we don't know how to listen to ourselves, we don't know how to follow the path that is authentic for us and the path that we're actually meant to be on to receive all that we're meant to receive in this life, to experience true fulfillment. And that true fulfillment comes from, first of all, learning how to listen to ourselves and what we truly want rather than chasing those ego desires that are rooted in fear, but also learning how to be present with each experience as it comes and knowing that that's kind of like the secret sauce to life is living in the present moment. Because the present moment is the only place where we have any power. The present moment is the place where we have the free will to be able to listen to what our intuition is telling us to do rather than listening to our fears. So in order to do that, we have to learn how to, one, create safety in our bodies, and we have to really understand where these fears are coming from. Because when we're not conscious of these fears, they control us. Often we'll have a lot of fear that is going on inside of us on a daily basis, but we've been so programmed to try to shut it down and just survive. So when we shut down these emotions of fear and the feelings that are coming up for us, they control us because they become unconscious. And our unconscious or subconscious mind controls 95% of the way that we think, feel, and act on a daily basis. So when we are not willing to face what is under that surface there, we are actually more controlled by it than if we were to take a look at it. The reason why we suppress and shut down is because these fears are often rooted in really uncomfortable emotions: pain, anger, frustration, sadness. Fear itself is a really uncomfortable emotion that comes with a lot of anxiety of the unknown. It's often a lot easier in the moment to just shut them away than to face them. And that's why so many of us are controlled by our fears, because we're scared. We're scared of what those emotions might bring up in us. We're scared that maybe we're not strong enough to face them. And often there is a feeling like, I will literally die if I face these fears. And so it's nothing to judge yourself for if you have been shutting your fears down and ignoring them, but it is something to become aware of, that we live in this illusion that if we just suppress it and shut it down, then those fears will go away. But if those fears are rooted in a emotion or a part of you that believes that you need to hold on to that fear in order to survive, it's not going to go away. It's actually just going to control you more. The other reason why a lot of us suppress our fears, especially in the spiritual community, is because we've been taught that feeling negative emotions is bad. We've been taught that we have to remain high vibe and think positive and not let our fears take over. And I personally believe there is a balance when it comes to this. Sometimes there are certain thought patterns that we need to just shut down and say, no, I'm not going there anymore. But again, if that fear is rooted to an emotion that we have not processed, that emotion, which is energy in motion, becomes stuck energy in the body that controls us. So the way that you can tell is if you just swat it away, and with that willpower, it actually does go away and you feel authentically better and high vibe and you're feeling like you're in alignment in your life, keep going with it. Don't unnecessarily give those fears more attention than they need. But if you feel like you're stuck in place, you're not going anywhere, you're trying to remain high vibe and really think positive thoughts, but deep down in your body, you feel really unsafe and disconnected and you can't hear your intuition, it's likely because you have emotions that are needing to be processed around these fears, and you're needing to learn how to create safety in your body. And so when we can slowly start to recognize that some of these fears that we've been shutting down to are actually controlling us more that way, we can use our free will to decide, I'm going to start to face this monster. I'm going to stop running away down this path that my ego is leading me on. I'm going to stop pretending that I'm fine and pretending to be high vibe. And I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to face this monster so that I can actually authentically free myself and stop running away from these things. And I'm going to show you how to do that when I explain those steps. But for now, I want to keep diving into where these fears come from. What is the root cause behind it? Because understanding this consciously is going to provide context for why you will take those steps at the end. So I want you to understand that if you find yourself obsessively afraid of the future and afraid of your survival, it's because you were programmed to operate in this way. Because operating in this structure has turned you into a perfect little worker bee. It has turned you into someone who is in service of a system that is already built, rather than creating your own system, rather than creating your own freedom and learning to trust yourself. Our society is built on the backs of people who are willing to sacrifice their well-being in the now in the pursuit of stability in the future. And I'm not saying that there aren't things that we can do in the now to plan for stability in the future, but when those actions we're taking in the now are rooted in fear, we often end up sacrificing ourselves. Day after day, we are taught to sacrifice our well-being in the pursuit of stability and comfort and whatever it is that we're wanting to create for ourselves in the future. We learn how to do this from a very young age. If you think about it, in school, we are taught to seek the approval of our parents and our teachers by getting perfect grades. So instead of being free and listening to ourselves and learning how to trust ourselves and our bodies, we are forced to study these subjects and do homework and study for tests in pursuit of this goal that we have in the future. The same thing with work. It's like we're taught that if we just suffer through school for all of these years, then we'll have stability in terms of a degree or a stable job. We're taught that if we climb up the corporate ladder, then one day we will have a stable career or money for retirement or all of these things. So it's programmed into the very structure of our society to be future-oriented rather than now-oriented. Rather than learning how to trust yourself, how to validate yourself, we've been taught to do what everybody else is doing in pursuit of a stability and a happy life that lies somewhere in the future. So many of us are waking up to the fact that this is not actually what we want, that we want to create lives that are fulfilling in the now, but in order to do that, we have to break away from the way that society operates, and it feels really scary. So many of us find ourselves in one of two places. Either one, too afraid to trust ourselves, continuing down that path that is constantly seeking that outer validation, constantly seeking happiness somewhere out in the future by sacrificing in the now, staying on that hamster wheel of trying to prove ourselves, trying to create stability outside of ourselves in order to feel safe. And that is a path that is really likely for us to follow because I would say the majority of society is in that place. And even though they feel unhappy, we don't really know any other way to function because we have all of these suppressed fears and emotions that are blocking us from being able to listen to our internal guidance. Our fears often can be so much louder than that guidance when we've learned how to shut down our intuition and be a part of this system. So when we start to try to break free from that, we often kind of end up in this limbo place where I've been stuck for a little while. I'm slowly breaking free and going down this path of trusting my intuition, but this limbo place is where we are aware that we no longer want to go down that path of being led by our fears, but the fears are still there. And we're aware of those fears, and we're also aware of this internal guidance within us telling us maybe quit your job. It's not serving you. Leave the relationship. Make this change in your life. Rest more. Meditate more. Make these changes. We often have that internal guidance within us. And we also have that voice of this obsessive, overwhelming fear that says, don't even think about it. Do you know what could happen if you make that choice? You might as well quit before you even start because you don't know that that's going to work. You don't know that it's actually going to lead you to that stability or safety. And so in this place, it's like these two voices battling against each other, and it can feel like I don't want to do anything because I'm afraid of making the wrong decision. So what would be the way to resolve that? We have to become aware of this voice of fear. We have to realize that this voice that is telling us to quit before we even start, that is telling us we have to follow what everyone else is doing, it is built into the very structure of our society to keep us disconnected from our power, to keep us disconnected from our true purpose and reason for being here, to keep us stuck in depression and unhealthy relationships and situations that aren't serving us, to be able to serve this other agenda of just being this mindless worker bee who doesn't really have any willpower left. Because when we are living in fear, it's because we have this source of life force energy that's in us, and all of that energy is going into things that have happened in the past, things that maybe you absorbed from watching the news or from listening to what your parents were afraid of or your teachers or your friends, living in the past, thinking about all those worst case scenarios that did happen or have happened in the world, and then all of that other life force energy is being projected into the future. well, what if this happens? What if this happens? And so you can see that all of your energy is being sucked out of your body and into places where you have no power, because your power only exists in this moment, because this moment, the present moment, is the only thing that is real. This is the only place where we have any willpower. So when you can consciously recognize that and remind yourself of that on a daily basis, you can recognize that this fear, this voice of fear, is taking your power away from you. It is actually taking your power away from you to do anything about these things that you're afraid of. To consciously recognize where your life force energy is going, whether it's going into the past, thinking about all the bad things that happened, or projecting those fears into the future, and realizing that you are giving all of your power away to do anything about it. When you consciously realize that, in that moment, you have the power to say, no, I'm going to be here now in this moment. And I'm going to start to learn how to create safety for myself internally, because I know that the only way to have outer safety in my life, outer stability in my life, is to create it internally. If I don't, then I'm going to be on that hamster wheel, running away from my fears, never able to feel present for the rest of my life. And when you are able to connect to the now, that is when you are able to get the guidance that is going to lead you on the path you are truly, truly meant to be on. When you connect to the now, you're going to start to hear a voice inside of you, to feel this deeper knowing of where you're meant to go. And often that voice is going to defy what your fears are telling you to do. Like for me, for example, my fear was telling me I needed to pump out more content, to work harder, to do more, because that's the narrative in this world, is that the more work you do, the better off you'll be, right? But I wanted to break free from that narrative. I didn't want to be working so hard to run away from my fears. I wanted to work smarter and not harder. And my internal guidance was telling me to rest at a time when I did not feel it was safe for me to truly rest. But as soon as I moved through the steps that I'm going to share with you and started to create safety to be able to rest in my life, I actually started to receive guidance that was teaching me how to do less work and make more of an impact. And so that's just one example of what can happen when you start to anchor your energy into the present moment. And what will happen is, as you start to take those steps, you're going to realize that on the path of alignment, and on the path that you're actually meant to be on, you are never going to receive guidance that tells you exactly where you are going to be on that path in a year from now, 10 steps from now. You're only going to receive very, very clear guidance on the next step that you are meant to take. Otherwise, you would get really confused, because the steps that are going to get you to your actual path of your greatest fulfillment are not going to be based in logic. They're not going to be based in things that have already happened before. Your conscious mind can't truly imagine how you are going to create the life that you want to create, but you are going to be given the next best step that you can take. And the reason why it is so dangerous to let the mind or fear get in the way is because your mind is going to tell you that before you even take that first step, you need to know that it is the right step, and you need to know exactly where it is leading you. That is what my mind was trying to get me to do, and that's what kept me stuck and paralyzed from even taking that first step. But you have to just free fall. This is where faith comes in. This is where you trust fall into the universe and just slowly start to listen to that guidance inside of you, because once you take that first step, the rest will become clear. And it's not going to be logical. It's not going to be linear. When you take that first step, maybe you fail miserably. And you have to start to learn to see that because this path isn't linear, failure doesn't actually exist. that step that you took that didn't turn out the way your mind thought it was supposed to maybe put you in the right place at the right time to meet a really important person in your life, or to hear about an opportunity, or to just learn certain knowledge that you will need in order to be able to create what it is that you want to create in the world. There are so many reasons as to why you might be guided to take certain steps that your mind truly can't comprehend. So that's why it's really important to learn how to face your fears so that they don't prevent you from taking that first step. So let's get into how to start to face your fears so that they aren't overwhelming and they're more so just like a little voice in the background that you observe, and you're actually able to take action from this intuitive, soul-led place. So the first step in this process is truly the most important step to any process. To me, this is the most important step to healing and connecting to yourself in general, but it is to connect to a presence of unconditional love within you. I start every process out with this because what a presence of unconditional love can provide for you is the safety to be able to venture into these places that you've been afraid to venture into. So a presence of unconditional love could be calling on Source, the universe, God, any beings or guides or angels or past loved ones. You can call on them. You can call on them right now. In any moment, you can call on these different energies or connections to show up for you and to support you on this path. Another way to call on an energy of unconditional love, if you're needing something a little more physical, of course, is to call a friend that you trust to be there with you as you take these next steps, to connect to your higher self, to call a family member, or to have a mentor who can teach you how to connect to that unconditional love within yourself. This is just really important because if we don't connect to a presence of acceptance and unconditional love for who we are in this moment, it makes the fears a lot scarier to face, because I would say that as I dove into the root cause of every single fear I've ever had, the deepest fear underneath all of it is that I will not be safe and I will not be loved. I will not be accepted. Those are pretty much at the root of every fear that we have. I will not survive. And so doing this provides this, I want to call it like just like a security blanket as you start to dive into these depths within yourself. The second step that kind of revolves around the analogy I was talking about before, where you imagine that your fear is this monster chasing you, and it's chasing you in the wrong direction. It's chasing you to make all of these decisions that are not truly right for you, that are rooted in survival and programming and what everybody else is doing, that are not truly going to fulfill you. Your ego is guiding you to these places to try to prove yourself, try to be successful as fast as possible, and you are constantly going to be on that chase if you don't turn around. So the second step is, with that love and support system around you, to turn around and look at this fear. And you don't have to look at it with anger. You don't have to attack it. Actually, what I would say helps to dismantle fear the most is love, understanding. Fear thrives when we feed it with more fear. So you can really start to unpack and understand this fear by looking at it for what it is. It is a part of you that is afraid. And if you start to see it as like an inner child part of you that is struggling and learned to believe this because of a system that you were in, or from your parents, or from an experience that you had as a child, this scary monster is all of a sudden this cowering little child. And when you face this child, you can start to see yourself with love and compassion. And that doesn't mean you accept the fear as your reality, but it means that you understand why that fear exists within you, or you are seeking to understand it. And the way that you can seek to understand it is by asking questions. So that's the next step. Get curious with this fear. Where are you coming from? Where did I learn to be afraid of this? When did I learn to be afraid of this? What are you trying to support me with? What are you trying to protect me from? And ask questions to this fear just to try to get to the root cause. What am I afraid will happen if this fear comes true? And then go beyond that. And then what? Why am I afraid of this? And then what could happen? Get to the very, very root of it. And as you tap into the root of where this fear is coming from, the next step is to, instead of analyzing it and talking through it, call on that emotion that is connected to that fear to begin moving through you. And so for me, I had a hard time really feeling sometimes the sadness and the anxiety, but something I could tap into was the anger that I was afraid, that this fear was preventing me from moving forward, and the anger that innocent little child learned to believe this and that it's held me back. And so the way that I would physically start to hold myself is sometimes I would sob and cry, especially if I was with a mentor or somebody who loved me and could hold me. Sometimes I would get angry, and this is something I would do on my own, is I would start to punch pillows and scream the things that I was afraid of and grunt and cry and scream into the pillow. You have no idea how healing it is. Maybe you do. I don't know. I had no idea how healing it was to physically express the emotions that are tied to these fears, because that is what is keeping it so powerful and alive within you, is the emotion behind it. So when you can let yourself release, you will feel so much more empowered. You might feel tired at first, and that's okay. I also recommend for this step to understand that you don't need to do it all at once. Go at the pace of your body. If you let out a cry and a grunt and then all of a sudden there's nothing more there, trust that and go slow with yourself, because this is a lot of energy to move through you. And that voice of fear is going to try and tell you that you need to do it all at once. Part of this process is identifying that voice and no longer listening to it. And so that is the next step. After you process these emotions, I highly recommend sitting in stillness with yourself and practicing the opposite of fear of the future, which is connection in the present moment. Practicing trust and faith, and practicing being here now, which requires trust and faith. Faith is not built by knowing what is going to happen 10 steps ahead. Faith is built when we have no clue what's going to happen, but we choose to believe in ourselves. We choose to trust ourselves and our ability to move forward. And we choose to be optimistic and believe that even if we don't know all of the answers, that good things are happening. That everything is happening for us to teach us more about who we are, why we're here, to guide us on our path, and that nothing happens on accident. That's where faith is built. And fear thrives when we disconnect from that and start to get paranoid about all of the negative things that could happen. But after you release those emotions, you are going to feel a lot more capable to sit with yourself and be in your body. And the way that I recommend doing this is through either stream of consciousness journaling. So don't get in your head, just write everything. You might start writing everything you're afraid of, get it out on paper. You might just write random things that you're thinking, things that come to you. That's a really positive way to do this if you struggle with meditation, if you enjoy meditation or you want to practice meditation. My biggest recommendation for that is compassion with yourself, because for me, as someone who struggled with meditation, I realized the thing that made it so painful for me was the fact that I was judging myself for not meditating right. So if you sit with yourself in meditation, I highly recommend just reminding yourself, I'm here in my body. Bringing it back to either your breath or bringing it back to that statement, I am here now. I'm here in my body. I'm with you, Michaela. Maybe speaking to yourself, I'm here. I'm here in this moment. And as you enter into that state, you can start to ask yourself, what did that child version of me, what did that past version of me, or what does the current version of me who's afraid right now need to hear? What did that part of me need to hear from a loving, authoritative parent? So an authoritative parent is the parent who is compassionate, unconditionally loving, and understanding of why that fear exists, but also has the balance of strength and faith and confidence in yourself that you can start to move forward again. So in that meditation, you can start speaking to yourself, you can start writing a letter to yourself, whatever it is. To me, meditation is just a time to connect with you and to train your brain and your body to start to feel safe living in the present again. The next step beyond this is in your meditation, in your journaling practice, eventually as you start to work through these fears, you're gonna start to hear your inner guidance system again. And you're gonna start to get guidance on that one step, that next best step. Anything beyond that, it's okay. You might get some guidance on where you're headed in the future, and that could be helpful. But focus on what am I meant to do in the now, because that is where your true power exists. That is where you have the power to create the reality that you want for yourself in the future. But don't fixate on that and just focus on where you're going in the now, because like I said, it will happen in unexpected ways. And when we try to plan too much, we often are doing that out of fear. So listen to the guidance you're getting in the now and know that the less logical sense it makes, it's likely your intuition speaking, because the intuition does not guide us through logic, through what everybody else has done, but what is truly right for us. And sometimes it's the thing that logically we think we don't need or that isn't safe for us to do. But with the safety that you're working on creating with yourself, with that healthy, loving relationship that you're starting to have, you will notice that you feel safer to start to take that action that doesn't make logical sense, because you know that if you fail, you have got you, and you are that loving parent figure to yourself that is going to tell you it's okay. Failure doesn't exist. It is simply guiding you towards the next place on your path, and you likely learned something so important that years down the road, you're going to be so grateful you learned. So be that voice of trust and faith and start to practice that by becoming aware of that fear, becoming aware of where that fear comes from, realizing that that fear is taking away your life force, energy, and all of your power to even do something about it. By observing that and letting those emotions move through you, holding space for yourself, reaffirming to yourself what you always needed to hear in your life, being that loving parent that you needed, you will start to move forward on a path towards what you do want to be experiencing rather than running away from what you don't want. And that is how to really start to remove that overwhelming fear of failure, fear of the future, and start to live a life that is so in alignment, a life built on a foundation of trust, and how to actually start to be able to live in the present because of the safety you're creating within yourself. The last step I would recommend is just patience, knowing this process is not linear, and do not let your fear tell you to give up before you've even started. Do not let your fear try to confuse you and bring you back on that other path, because in your heart, if you've watched this much of the video, if you're still here, you know that your life is meant for more than that, and you are the one that has the power to do this. If you're wanting a little bit more support in this process, I'm actually going to be hosting a live virtual workshop with my mentor, Siobhan, who is literally an angel sent from heaven in my life. She has been so supportive to me on this healing journey. She's a psychic medium and spiritual mentor. She is going to be leading a discussion on the collective consciousness around this fear programming and how to dismantle it. And then I'm going to be leading a group hypnotherapy session to help create that safety and stability and connection to unconditional love within us that provides us with that stability to be able to trust again. While I do that, Siobhan will be doing collective energy healing on the group, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So if you had any questions that came up during this video, I highly recommend joining us for that or commenting your questions below. That event is going to be on July 7th, 2024 at 3 p.m. Pacific time. If you can't make it, there will be a recording sent out to all the participants. And if you're watching this video after that date, then the recording of that hypnotherapy session and the whole workshop will be available on my online shop. Thank you again so much for being here. If you liked this video and found it helpful, make sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and if you had any breakthroughs or questions, again, please comment them below. I love to hear from you guys. I love to connect with you all. So grateful to each and every one of you for being here, and I will see you in the next one.